Play faking in. Sam is going to roll left. Looking. Sam throws. Back of the end zone. Is it caught in bounds? It is. Touchdown! Seahawks!
We did not care. It's about us. It's always been about us and what we do. Now we're going to the Super Bowl.
There we go. Welcome into another Hawks Eye live show. I'm your host, Bryce Coutts, and I'm finally back. Took a little bit of a break after our Super Bowl victory, and today I'm joined by none other than Dan Viens of Seahawks Forever. Dan, how you doing?
I'm good. I took my break last week. Needed a couple of days to recharge the batteries because that was quite the year. That was quite the run. It was fun watching your new intro. Reliving some of those moments. You're going to have to add a confetti shot or something to it.
I'm going to have to find a way there, Dan, to splice his "we did not care" and then have him holding up the Super Bowl with Ken and Sam at the end there. And maybe add a play or two from that Super Bowl. Who knows?
Yeah. I think it's time for a refresh for Seahawks Forever on the old intro. It's been 3 years. I think it's time.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one thing. I had one go for a long time. Now I moved to that. Now I got to re-up it because, well, we won the Super Bowl and we are the best in the world.
That's right.
And so with that, Dan, let's talk about how this team's kind of changed in a week. We've obviously seen Clint Kubiak leave and go to Vegas, which we all kind of knew was going to happen. And some of the story behind that's kind of interesting about how John Schneider let the Raiders know. Mm-hmm. Clint was very much of, hey, look, I owe everything to this team. I'm almost struggling to have these interviews. But with that being said, Clint's gone, and the Seahawks have a new OC. Brian Flurry, the tight ends coach and run game coordinator from the San Francisco 49ers, has joined the staff, as well as a few other new staff members. And I'll bring that graphic up on the screen right now so we can talk about a few of these guys. So Seattle's added a few. They've added Zachary Orr, the now linebackers coach of the Seahawks, but coming from the Baltimore Ravens as their DC last year. Daniel Stern, who we kind of have assumed and I've kind of been told is probably going to take over the quarterback coaching role now that Andrew Janocko has moved on to Vegas. And then obviously Brian Flurry has come on as the offensive coordinator. Dan, what do you make of all these additions? And let's start with Zachary Orr first off. We'll go with him. What are your thoughts on this?
First of all, we also found out today or yesterday, I think it was Albert Breer's piece, that Orr was a guy that McDonald decided to bring on even before the playoff run. That as soon as he was let go and Mike knew he was available, he had some DC interviews, but didn't get any of those gigs, that he was going to bring him on board. And that's just one that makes a whole lot of sense. He wanted to hire him as his defensive coordinator originally when he first got the job, and then he got the promotion to stay in Baltimore, and that's when he turned to adding Dirty. Now he has Dirty and Orr. And even though things didn't go all that well this last year for Orr in Baltimore, and you know, you and I and Brandon, while we were down in Mobile, we went back and as we were prepping for the Patriots, and we watched their, I think it was week 13 or 14 game against the Ravens, and we noticed that, like, this doesn't look like the defense that Mike McDonald's running. He was running completely different coverages on the back end than what we're used to seeing. And so, you know, maybe it's just too soon for him. I know they had some injury issues in Baltimore this last year. Obviously, no Justin Madubuike makes a huge difference. Kyle Hamilton was hurt for much of the year. It wasn't as good of a season for Marlon Humphrey and others. But now you get this young defensive mind back on your staff. He knows the system. He knows the communication. He knows everything else. And he's a master at coaching linebackers. I just think this is a win-win. This is a guy that, for two reasons. I think there's some reason, and there's a growing buzz around adding Dirty. Apparently he really, really did well in his 2 head coaching interviews that he had this year. And it sounds like he might be a guy that's in line to get a head coaching job next year. Not a play calling defensive coordinator job elsewhere, but a head coaching job, in which case Orr would slide nicely into the defensive coordinator role. Or he spends a couple years on McDonald's staff. He gets another shot at DC somewhere else, and the Seahawks get a comp pick for it. This is just win-win-win all the way around.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to read. I think it was Albert Breer, I think, put the article out. But to your point about they tried to acquire him then, and then Mike knew before the Super Bowl run once Zach was basically out there and was available, that he wanted to add him to the staff. And so I look at this as just, again, this is Mike Macdonald being, in my opinion, very forward thinking. I'm probably going to lose Durde soon here. Carl Scott maybe even going soon, as he's had a few DC opportunities.
Right.
I need to figure out someone I trust that knows my system that can come in and be my DC. And, you know, I think Orr is a perfect fit for it. And the thing I think in that case is if Durde does leave and Carl Scott does leave, I think there's a conversation to be had that maybe if Zachary Orr does take over, he gets play calling duties and Mike finally relinquishes that. Because remember, at the opening press conference, Mike was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to do it for this year. And now, obviously, you know, this past season. But I feel like eventually in his evolution as a coach, he does kind of want to maybe pass that off a little bit. And I think maybe to a guy like Orr, that might be, you know, more of a realistic option, especially if Scott and Durde are gone. But let's move on to the guy in the middle of this graphic, Daniel Sternin. He's an interesting one, Dan. I know you and me have been going back and forth on him a little bit, just kind of find as much information as we can. I know I sent you that QB Collective clip where he's talking and stuff, and he just sounds like the offensive Mike Macdonald in a way. Like he's so analytical. He's so, you know, to the point about things. I think this may be an opportunity where Seattle's got their potential offensive coordinator 4 years ahead of time, kind of a thing where this could be the guy that eventually is the, you know, next Grant Udinski type guy.
Yeah, he's one of those classic guys, and it makes you wonder how many others there are around the league that you're just not aware of, that you just don't know anything about. I'd never heard of Daniel Stern before. And then once you hear the name, first of all, elite first name, but one of the great first names of all time. So, you know, I was immediately drawn to it. But, you know, then you find out, you see the piece on Good Morning Football with Peter, Peter Schrager 5 years ago, when he was even younger and even more unknown about how important he was, considered one of John Harbaugh's right-hand men. Obviously, Mike Macdonald got to see him operate. He spent 10 years there, really working his way up from a very, very young age, very heavily involved in strategic decisions, situational football, analytics, red zone stuff. And this was a guy that Macdonald just brought in before any of these other moves were known. This is just somebody who wanted to add to the staff. And I keep going back to a week ago today when he had his last radio show on Seattle Sports 710 that he had done every week throughout the season. And he talked about, you know, he spent 90% of his answer about the OC position talking about how they want to set up a system where guys go off and do greater things elsewhere because that means you're having success. But then you have the infrastructure in place to promote from within, and we just have a system and we just keep rolling with that. But then he threw this little line in at the end where he said, but that doesn't mean we're not going to look for talent from outside and augment our staff whenever we can. This was just a case, people made way too much out of it. Oh, Janoko's gone for sure. This is before we knew he was going to. Oh, that must mean Pete's is gone and he's going to take over pass game coordinator. No, he was just added to the staff because they think he's really smart and really talented and has a bright future. And then they'll figure the role out later after all the dust settles.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing with Stern was when they did bring him on, I was under the impression, okay, this is your hedge against Janoko leaving. It's your hedge against Pete's leaving. So you're not having to try and go grab somebody late out of the blue. And this is where, for me, like I look at it and I go, this is, again, Mike Macdonald being forward thinking, Mike Macdonald looking ahead. And to your point about the augmenting of the staff, this is where I think Mike Macdonald is more comfortable than maybe even Pete Carroll was, of going outside his comfort zone and going and hiring outside, even though he's got the internal promotion. So that kind of leads really nice into this last candidate that's now our offensive coordinator here. And that's Brian Flurry. And like, you know, we talked about it. It was, you know, Greg Bell, Brady Henderson, all were reporting after Mike's Super Bowl post press conference the day after that, hey, the feeling within the building is Seattle is going to have a quick hire. It's going to be internal. You know, yourself, me, Brandon Kane, Mookie, and our group chat, we're all going, okay, Outen's probably the leader. I had been hearing Outen was probably the guy that they were looking at most likely. Okay, Pete's is involved, Janoko's involved. And then the other interesting name at that point was Mac Brown got thrown in there, the tight ends coach. Yeah, kind of threw all of us off a little bit.
Not the former Texas and North Carolina coach. He's too old for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, okay, so Seattle's going to go through this process. Obviously, Janoko got probably the first crack in that. And then all of a sudden you saw the one pass game coordinator from the Cardinals come up, which I think was to, appease the Rooney Rule to a point.
Mm-hmm.
And then Brian Flurry's name came up as someone that Seattle was, going to interview. And I started texting around and, messaging people and people I know are connected. I was like, can you give me any background on this guy? And the words that I kept getting back were up and coming, very, very close to Kyle Shanahan, understands the scheme inside and out, and has a very diverse background. And I went, okay. And I remember saying, if he was in there, if he's going to get this job, he's going to have to blow Mike McDonald and John Schneider and that group away. And clearly he did, because he's now our offensive coordinator. And what were your initial feelings, Dan, when you saw that news break on, I guess it was Sunday, that Brian Flurry was going to be the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks?
Well, it was interesting tracing the process through, as you touched on, that we thought we knew all the characters that were involved, right? Including Connor Senger, who you mentioned, pass game coordinator from Arizona. And there has to also, by the way, you have to interview 2 minority candidates. So someplace out there is one that we've never heard of, that they had to have interviewed as well. Maybe we'll never hear of it, or maybe it'll come out at some point. But we knew that the Jeremy Fowler report from Wednesday that said those 4 internal guys were going to interview on Thursday and Friday. And so, we're still all caught up in the, basking in the Super Bowl parade and all of that. And I remember thinking, I think I even tweeted it, that, Thursday, Friday, hopefully by the end of the weekend, we'll get a decision. I'm with you. I've been saying for weeks, I thought it was Outen over Janoko, just based on some recent comments from McDonald talking about how much Outen means to the offense, and also the job that he did really with the running backs after he took over. I thought that was pretty impressive. And the fact that he's called a couple of games before. I mean, it's only 2 games, but it's 2 more than Andrew Janoko had ever called. So that's kind of where I was. And then if you remember the timing, the Brian Flurry news that he was going to be interviewed came out Saturday morning. So after they had interviewed the guys Thursday and Friday, and I thought, that's interesting. He's not a minority candidate, right? He's from outside the organization. This comes after they interviewed their own guys. And then I remembered he got some interviews last year, didn't he? It turned out it was only 1. I wasn't that far off. He interviewed with the Patriots for their offensive coordinator position before they hired Josh McDaniel last year. And so I thought, okay, well, this guy is, he's worked under Shanahan. And then I looked up his whole resume, and and I said at the time, and Brock Heward even said it on 710 today. He said, you'd be hard pressed to find a more varied resume for an offensive coach anywhere. There's hardly a position group or a phase of football that he hasn't coached before at some level. Played quarterback in college, coached special teams, coached linebackers in the NFL, then switch back over to the offensive side. And then you start to dig in a little bit more, because you see the skepticism. I've got some of it over here in my comments. Hank Murbaugh says, I'm nervous about this hire because the 49ers run game wasn't very efficient, but neither was ours. And then detail-oriented Bobby says, run game coordinator has very little to do with setting up plays or decisions and calling them, so you can't lay the 49ers run game at his feet. And you hear skepticism about his lack of experience. But then when you dig deeper, you find quotes from Kyle Shanahan himself just a month ago of how intimately Fleury was involved in the offense. And 2 phases to this, that he only got the run game coordinator title in 2025, but he was an integral part of coaching the run game in 23 and 24. He just didn't have the title. And then you come to find out that he has been creating plays, organizing plays, writing the call sheets, helping put the game plans together. And then most of all, along with Chris Forrester and Clay Kubiak on game day, and I'd never heard this before, from Kyle Shanahan's own mouth, that these guys suggest play calls to him in the moment throughout the game. So maybe he hasn't had the headset on and called plays all by himself, but he's worked through those mental reps for 7 years under Kyle Shanahan, for the last 3 years as an active participant and one of the voices that Kyle listens to on game day. To me, that puts him right there as close as you can get to having play call experience without having actually done it.
And the thing I'll say to some of the comments there, Dan, just as a coach myself, and having been a pass game coordinator and worked on a staff where there was an OC, there was a run game coordinator, there was a pass game, like you essentially are coordinating your actual scheme. So like the passing concepts were coming through me, and when it came to moments in the game where we were going to throw the ball, the OC is going in and said, okay, what are my 3 best options here? Give me the 3 best plays. Okay, here are my 3 best suggestions to you. And they take those and then they run with them. And they may give 2 of those calls to the quarterback in the huddle, because you hear about, hey, you got 2 plays given to the quarterback, and you hear them all the time say can, or cancel. Same with the run game. So, and you go back and you look at Darrell Bevel and Tom Cable. Tom Cable was calling the run game for those Seattle Seahawks teams. And even this year, you listen to Clay Kubiak and Mike McDonald talk about how the offensive group worked. It was like, yeah, well, Clay did call plays, but there were other guys calling plays in there, whether it was Justin Outten, whether it was Rick Dennison or Jake Peets, when it came to certain things. Like they also had a say in it too. So to kind of go and to your point, like when I've dug into Fleury's background here and really looked at it, what I see out of this is, and the one thing I keep hearing is he is a great teacher. And that's something that I think Mike wants. He wants somebody that can teach the offense. You listen to what Clay had to say in his, acceptance press conference, I should say, for the Raiders job, talked about how Mike would come in and basically challenge him. Like, why did we do this here? Why did we do this here? Mm-hmm. And was very involved. I think Mike is looking for someone on offense that will be able to give those answers back and not just sit there and be like, oh, I felt like calling it there. Instead of being like, no, this is how we got to this process of this play call at this particular moment in this game. And the other thing I'll say about the 49ers run game wasn't great. You have an aging Christian McCaffrey who still ended up with over 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. You lost your tight end through most of that season in George Kittle, who's one of the best run blockers in the NFL. You lost Trent Williams. You had a bunch of injuries on that offense throughout the entire year, and to the point where when you are playing your backup quarterback, you are going to have teams load the box, and you still produce that amount of yards. Like, I'm okay with the fact that that's the guy that we picked. I think it's going to be an interesting hire. But the other thing I'll say, Dan, I think that's really interesting is we now know John Benton's sticking around, yep. Right? And this is the key kind of part of this right now is the, domino effect on the staff. So Janoko's gone, Rick Dennison's gone, which are 2 that you and me, we talked about it in Mobile. We're like, yeah, Vegas is getting Kubiak. Those 2 are probably the 2 that are going to go.
Yep.
Sounds like Outen's staying. Sounds like Jake Peets is staying. And sounds like John Benton is for sure staying.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is interesting here is Fleury's connection to John Benton. They have a history of working together, which, again, I think is key. And I think, again, this bodes to maybe why they brought Fleury in is a situation of, hey, Peets, Outten, and Benton all signed off on this being like, hey, we can work with this guy. We can make this work.
Yeah, and it's human nature to wonder, and I know a lot of people have speculated and are concerned about, well, hey, this is, Justin Outten might have thought the job was his, and now he's been passed over essentially for a guy from the outside, from a rival, no less. Jake Peets has now been passed over twice. Like, they didn't even interview him for offensive coordinator after his first year. And so, are these guys upset? Are they looking to get out? To which, the first part of that answer is there just aren't any jobs open right now. And so unless they want to sit out a year because they're so butthurt, that's available to them. The other thing though is, you can do a lot worse than working for the best organization in football that's coming off a Super Bowl win with an opportunity to win more. That eases a lot of, sore feelings and hurt feelings, I would think. But also, like, I reached out to Corbin Smith today and asked him, and he said everything that he hears in covering the team is that neither of those guys are upset. They understand what's going on and that they're excited for the partnership. And that's what I really like, is the sum of all the parts here, right? Because, Justin Outten has called plays, so Brian Flurry can lean on him there a little bit. And then while one of the things that Brian Flurry doesn't have on his resume is any pass game experience. And so you're keeping the guy that was the pass game coordinator last year and the year before, 2 different systems. So now he's familiar with Kubiak's way of doing things. He's worked under Sean McVay. So he brings some of those ideas to the table. And then you have Outen with his run game, offensive line, running back. It's like a three-headed monster that I think really, really bodes well for Seattle. And the other connection, you mentioned the Benton connection. They worked together for 2 years in San Francisco. Brian Flurry knows Eric Saubert, coached him. He was his position coach, so he's familiar with him. Obviously had Sam Darnold for a year, even had Clint Kubiak. And so they even go a little farther back. And then you listen to him speak. I've watched some clips now of him talking, and you can see why he appeals to Mike Macdonald. Like, he's such a clear communicator. And like you said, teacher. I think it's an inspired hire. I think it takes, I think it requires more guts and outside the box thinking to do this. I think staying in-house, even though maybe you didn't have conviction it was the right thing to do, would have been the safe move, but maybe you'd be regretting it down the road. I am always going to support this organization for swinging big and trying for home runs instead of doubles. And, maybe this won't work and he won't be a good play caller, right? But even if that happens, we haven't even talked about the players yet. And this guy is going to be inheriting, quite possibly, entire continuity on offense. All 11 starters plus key backups, all up and down all the position groups. Even if there's a learning curve and there's some bumps along the way, like you've got a top 10 quarterback, a 25-year-old average age offensive line coming off their best season in 10 years. Your full tight end group is back. We'll see what happens with running back, but they're going to address that. You see what I'm saying? Like, he's got a lot to work with. He doesn't have to get those guys up to speed either. So I think it's a great, we call it a soft landing in baseball terms, right? When you get like a kid makes his first debut and it's against a crappy team or whatever. It's, I think it's a pretty good situation to drop a new guy into. Someone, you have to call plays for the first time sometime. Sean McVay had to call plays for the first time someday at one time. Kyle Shanahan had to call plays for the first time at one time. Everybody has to have a first time.
The one thing that I really like about this is his diverse background. We're talking about a guy that started out as a quarterback at Maryland, grew up in a coaching household. So his dad was one of the best high school coaches in the state of Maryland, I believe, when he was there. Goes and walks on at Maryland, then goes to another university to finish out his career, and then ends up at a point in time being a defensive analyst for one of the time and period for that Miami Dolphins team in the early 2010s there, where they had a pretty good defense. And then obviously kind of moves over to the offensive side, and he's been with Shanahan now for 7+ years. And the one thing I kind of got when people saw this, and some people kind of pushed back on me a little bit, was, well, this feels like Shane Waldron all over again, a tight end coach that's been in the system a little bit, so, and I was kind of like, well, a little bit, yes and no, because yes, I get the appeal of it being a similar, parallel, but we're talking about a guy that was there for almost a decade in the system, moved up in the system from basically an offensive analyst all the way into different positions. That's different than what Shane Waldron did. Shane Waldron was only in McVay's system, I believe, for 3 years, maybe 4 at tops, and then kind of was jettisoned. And he never really got a coordinator or say in what they did offensively. He never had, hey, Sean, this is what we should do. It was never one of those things. This is a little bit different in that regard. And the one thing I'll say for Fleury here, and, I'll bring this one up here because this is from Megan here in the chat, goes, hey, not sure about Fleury. Just hope it's not like Grubb, which I fear it may be. The thing I'll say about the difference here, Megan, in this case, and this is where I'll kind of go with this, is Grubb had no NFL experience, period. 0. Coming from college, 0 experience in the NFL game. Now, yes, I get that Fleury doesn't have play calling experience for a whole season, but we are talking about a guy that was very invested in what the 49ers ran, especially in the run game. We're talking about a guy that's basically coached in the NFL for over a decade. You pick up things when you're in the rooms and around bright minds like Kyle Shanahan and such, to those points. And that's where I look at, Ben Johnson was a tight ends coach before he got to call plays.
Mm-hmm.
Sean McVay was a tight ends coach before he got to call plays.
Yeah, he was.
So everyone's kind of got to start somewhere, but you're also not giving this guy a rookie quarterback he's got to develop at the same time he's learning to play, call plays. You're talking about a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I love saying that now about Sam Darnold. It's one of the best things that has experience, especially in this system. So again, he can help with that process. You have a John Benton, a Justin Outen, a Jake Peets, who again have experience in this system. And it's going to make, to your point, Dan, that soft landing that much softer for a guy going, I have people I can relay and rely on for myself and relay information in and out of on where we think we should go with this. And then ultimately, yes, he does have the final call. I also don't think Mike Macdonald is going to put himself in a Ryan Grubb situation again.
Well, yeah. And again, to remind everybody, the Grubb thing, that happened so late in the process, right? And Macdonald didn't have an opportunity to bring anyone with him. There wasn't really anyone on that Ravens staff. You know, we thought at the time maybe T. Martin, but he obviously, you know, Macdonald didn't feel like he was qualified, and he's yet to get an OC job even since then. A couple of things I'll say, just kind of playing off what you said there. These are completely different people, completely different situations. Like, Fleury's not going to fail because Shane Waldron failed. Just like, you know, before this hire, I had people telling me, oh, you can't promote from within because look how it worked out for the Eagles. Ridiculous connection. Like, different people, different times, different experience. When Shane Waldron was hired, I was intrigued by the McVay connection and the Rams experience, but I never felt inspired by him when I heard him speak. He never sounded like a guy that had a mastery of the offense, and he never looked like it on the field either. He just looked like a guy that kind of collected this information from the program he was in with the Rams and then just used the same playbook and called those plays, but he didn't master the concepts of it. And he wasn't, he was just kind of a steward of it, right? If that makes sense. The other part of it is, you know, we talk about the lack of play calling experience. I just thought of another example of someone who got a big opportunity and never called plays, and then very, very quickly afterwards became known as one of the best play callers and innovative offensive minds in the NFL. Mike McDaniel never called plays before he got the head coaching job with the Miami Dolphins. So he sold them on himself and got the head coaching job, and he had never called a play on his own, ever. Like, that's crazy. And he was immediately like one of the great play callers in the league. So it could be in him. And then just one more thing I want to say about the run game thing, when people want to point to that and say, well, the run game wasn't as effective in 25 as we're used to seeing. They played in a lot more shootouts. They had to play from behind more than they're used to. That defense stunk, and that offense had to be different. They couldn't run the ball as much as Kyle Shanahan would like to at times because they had to try and keep up with teams and come from behind. So, yeah, I'm nothing but optimistic and positive about this hire. And I just think it's a cool hire that they did this, that they went out and did this.
I agree. And so let's kind of talk about the impact this hire is going to have on this 2026 offensive ceiling here, Dan, because again, this whole offense may be back in full.
This guy's going to like it right here.
Oh yeah. Him. And I think Elijah Royal will like and enjoy this offense. This is one thing I will say, and it's something that, you know, just even in my own playing career and coaching career, when I was playing, my best offensive coordinator was a tight ends coach by trade. And the one thing I asked him when I went into my coaching career, and I'm still very close to this coach now, I asked him, I was like, you know, how has this come so easy to you? He goes, tight ends are one of the very few positions outside of quarterback that have to understand both facets of the offense.
Mm-hmm.
They have to understand the blocking, the run game, as well as the protection game and the route running game in an offense. And he goes, so for me, I have to know everything. I don't have to be an ace at everything, but I have to know everything and be able to understand everything. And so it actually brings up a really good point here that I think someone brought up here in the chat. I'm just going to go find it. Here it is. It's from Islam there. Goes, seems like tight end coaches make up the best offensive minds. Ben Johnson, Sean McVay, and even Dan Campbell come to mind, and they're top tier coaches in this league.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a fair point because it's one of the few things in position groups where you kind of have to learn everything, right? You look at AJ Barner, he's got to block, he's got to run routes, he's got to stay in and help in pass protection situations. Like, he's involved in every aspect of the offense. So it's going to be interesting, but the impact that this will have on the offense, Dan, I think one big thing is it'll make, again, it easy for Sam Darnold. There's no new offense he's going to have to learn. Maybe some terminology changes a little bit, but probably not that much.
Yeah.
The core concepts and principles of the offense are probably going to be the same.
Yeah, that's the intention of Mike Macdonald. When he hired Clint Kubiak last year, he didn't just hire Clint Kubiak, he hired a scheme. He had decided, based on what he saw from Grubb the first year and what he'd seen from around the league, and given the benefit of more time to work on it, that's the scheme that he wanted to complement his defense. He wanted that everything that goes along with that Shanahan-Kubiak scheme, where everything looks the same, run pass, where there's lots of motion, under center, play action, condensed splits, all of that stuff. And that's why, Clint brought a bunch of those guys with him too. It wasn't just about hiring Clint, the play caller. It was about hiring a system and bringing all those guys in to teach it. And so even if we had lost a couple more coaches than it looks like we're going to, I would have been okay, because there are other guys that have run this scheme before that they could have found to come in and execute it, but the scheme isn't going to change. And so we're not going to have to reteach Sam Darnold every single year another offense. It's just going to be a tweak here or there. The other thing I like is, like, even though Clint Kubiak runs an offense that he obviously learned from his dad and from Mike Shanahan, and it mirrors more closely what they're doing in San Francisco now than what they're doing in LA. Like, Sean McVay has really evolved that offense, and it looks a lot different than what Shanahan's doing, especially in the run game. That Kubiak strayed from it a little bit, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this as from a coaching eye, where, Shanahan still stays kind of more pure to the scheme. Like, Kubiak was good, better than any offensive play caller we've ever had at making things all look the same, right? Even down to the first step from the offensive linemen and the receivers and the techniques and stuff. So that the defense couldn't key on, oh, that's run. Shanahan takes that to another level and even makes Kubiak look like an amateur when it comes to some of that stuff. And then he's continuing to innovate and add things to the offense, as Clint did too. So I just think having a guy that's been there for 7 years and watching that day in, day out, watching, him build that team up to what it is today with good players and bad players, pre-CMC, post-CMC, right? With good, he's seen him coordinate that offense with great receivers, with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk running wild, and he's seen him do it with a patchwork of guys that they had to sign off the street at midseason. I think that's really valuable experience.
No, I couldn't agree more, Dan. I think it's very valuable. I think the one thing you'll see maybe with this offense that we didn't see last year, I think you might see a more dynamic and maybe an offense that has more answers to the puzzle when it comes to the run game than we've had with Kubiak. And not to say that Kubiak didn't, but we know those games where it kind of got like, okay, like we can't get it going a little bit here. The Rams loss comes to mind a little bit in some respects, and some of the other games. I feel like the one thing Kyle is very good at is the run game is still very effective throughout the entirety of the game. He never gets totally bottled up in a situation, and I think that's what's going to be really interesting. I also think the thing that's going to be interesting too is one thing I'll say Kyle does better. I think the only one that does it better than him is McVay, is the use of creative motions. Like Clint did a little bit, like he orbited JSN a few times. We saw that, but a lot of it was very much typical one receiver to the other side, or the tight end comes from out wide into the offensive line area, into the box. But there were things that, Kyle was doing this year with Kyle Juszczyk that no one had been really doing, which was the wide swing out motions where he's like sprinting from the tight all the way out to the receiver spot and then running a wheel up the sideline and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of sprinkles Flurry brings to his McFlurry of an offense.
I do love the nickname. I saw today, Dirty McFlurry is one I saw today too. It was kind of cool.
Well, I like it better than Triple H's clone. That's the other one I've heard. But you got the McDonald and the McFlurry. Like, it's kind of a cool kind of thing. We see what the memes come out with that. But
he's such a relatable guy too. Like, I spent 30 years in the restaurant and bar business, right? And there's every bar I ever managed or worked at, there was a regular that look just like Brian Flurry, you know, bald, the long beard and everything coming. He just looks like a relatable dude. And then I think the thing that we're all excited about is it stands to reason that if you have extensive experience coaching tight ends, you might just be a little bit more naturally inclined to get your tight ends involved in the passing game. And as much as we've seen, you know, some great things from AJ Barner, and we saw a couple of flashes from Elijah Arroyo, and we were all excited about the upside when they took him in the second round. The athletic ability is off the charts. Like, Clint never really had a plan for him, never really got him ingratiated into the offense on a consistent basis. And even Barner, it'd be a big play here or there, and then we wouldn't hear from him for 3 games. You see the tight end be more of a consistent part of that offense in San Francisco. Even when Kittle went down, Jake Tonjes kind of picked things up without really skipping a beat. And then the involvement of the running backs in the passing game is something I expected to see so much more of from Clint this year. We saw it during his year in New Orleans. I mean, Kamara had like 70 or 80 catches last year. It's a staple of the Shanahan offense. And we just never saw it get going. Late in the season, we saw a couple of screen passes work. Don't know where those were the first 10 or 11 games. But if we can get those 2 elements added to this offense, it's only going to make things easier for Sam Darnold, and I think make that offense more balanced and ultimately more explosive.
I think the interesting thing to you know, your point you were just talking about with Arroyo is I never felt, even when Clint was in New Orleans, you saw spurts of it with, you know, Jawan Johnson down there and Taysom Hill, a little bit. But you never saw high tight end usage. Like, you never really saw it go crazy. And I think this is one thing Kyle does better than Clint, is doesn't get locked in on his favorite weapon too much. Like, he's able to still stay relatively balanced in how he uses things. We saw that a little bit with JSN at points throughout the year, where we got really reliant on JSN. And then, yes, we were able to still make things happen, but it was against, you know, Minnesota. And even in the Super Bowl, it was, okay, we couldn't really get JSN the ball the way we wanted to. And so luckily Cooper Kupp and, you know, other players ended up, and Ken Walker had a fantastic game. But that's one thing I'm going to be interested to see with Fleury is, what does his offense lean into more? Like, does it lean into even more the outside zone than we saw this year in variations of it? And maybe, you know what, one thing I think we'll see more of this year, Dan, that I'm really hoping for is the boot game. I think that might become another thing that we see a little bit more of, because that's something Kyle is very, very much a big component of, is that boot game. So maybe we see a little bit more of that. But let's see and talk about this a little bit. Free agents, you know, and then after this, we'll start talking with the viewers in here. But what kind of free agents are you watching closely? And let's just start with in-house, Dan. Who do you think? Give me your top 3 that you think will be back in a Seahawks uniform in 2026.
So I've talked extensively about this week, even earlier in the week. I think on Sunday, I did a breakdown with contract projections as well for all the big guys. And here's where I'm at. And I know everyone's freaking out about Ken Walker today because of the franchise news that Adam Schefter put out. It wasn't really news. It was much ado about nothing. We've talked about the tag as something that they might use, but that was before they bumped it up to 14.3. It was like 13.6, I think, for a little while. And Snyder's just never really used it. He's used it twice. Frank Clark, and then he traded him, and then he used it on a kicker. That's the only time he's ever used franchise tag. The problem with the franchise tag is it immediately forces you to have to account for that money. It comes off your cap. You can't use it for anything else. But also then it becomes a starting point in negotiations for the agent at an AAV. And so today didn't change anything for me. I still think Walker wants to be here. Why wouldn't he? It's a run-centric offense. It's going to give him a chance to be productive consistently and be a star and win. He has a home in Dallas. He's from Memphis. Does he want to play for the Cowboys or Titans? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But he's said on record, if it's my choice, I want to be here. So I think at the end of the day, I lean Walker's going to be here. Shaheed's going to be here. And those guys, I think, will both get done before free agency starts. I think they're the priorities. And I think the Seahawks are working on it right now. And they'd like to get them done before March 9th. And I think they will. They have a history of doing that. Both players have stated they want to be here, especially Shaheed. He's emphatic about it. And so I think those guys will get done. I think Josh Jobe will be back because he'll get a big raise, but he'll come in at a reasonable number. He wants to be here. They want him here. And, you just hear the coaches rave about him. He kind of exhibits everything that they like in a Seahawk. So I think he's back. I think Reek walks and Mafe walks, and Bryant I'm 50-50 on. I think Bryant is one of those guys. First of all, he wants to test the market. We know that because he turned down their contract offer before the season. And it sounds like maybe they tried to re-engage during the season, and he still didn't want to agree to a deal there. So I think he wants to test free agency. And there's a chance that someone will pay him more than Julian Love. And I don't know if that makes sense, especially when you have Ty Okada. So that's where I'm at right now. I think Walker, Shaheed, and Jobe are back for sure. I think Mafe and Reek walk. And then I think they take care of all their restricted guys, Ty Okada, Drake Thomas, all those guys, bring them back too.
So I'm in the same boat as you. I think Rashid is going to be a Seahawk. I think that's priority number one. And I think right behind,
I think that might be the first move that they make.
I totally agree. I think that is the first move that they make. And I think, Ken Walker is the second move that they make. And then to your point, I think Josh Jobe is, the next guy in line. I don't expect Kobe to be back. I don't expect Reek to be back. And Reek obviously posted today, kind of not expecting to be back with his cryptic, Fresh Prince gif and reposting someone saying 4 years over, heartbroken, and him at the parade. And I think there's probably conversations that have happened behind closed doors already where they've said, go test the market, give us a call when you get your offers, and we'll see if we can match kind of thing. And it actually the Reek situation leads me to one of my potential out of the Seahawk in-house free agents that I think is going to be a Seahawk. I think you know who I'm going to reference there when we get to that point. But I also think Mafe and Reek are going to get big offers. I think Boye Mafe might get a bigger market than people would expect. And it's crazy.
I was out on Mafe a year ago when Gregory Rousseau and George Karlaftis both signed like identical 4-year, $80 million deals, and they're not even the best pass rusher on their own team.
Yeah,
that was before the season started. And I was like, well, I'm out on Mafe because some team is going to pay for the upside, the athletic ability, and the ceiling. Right? What could be. And maybe in a different scheme, he does get more sacks. But it just doesn't. Yeah, I think he's going to get 15 a year minimum. And that just doesn't make sense.
I definitely think that's what's going to happen with Mafe. I also think one other candidate that gets re-signed here is Josh Jones. I think he's a guy that gets reworked and redone and brought back.
I'd love to
probably
see
on a 2-year deal. I think it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, I think part of the Bryant situation is due to Ty Okada. I think they love Ty Okada. I think he, for all intents and purposes, in my opinion, and I love Kobe Bryant, and you know that as much as the next person, but I also love Ty Okada, and I thought Ty Okada was a better fit and played better this year than Kobe did when he got his opportunities to truly start in this defense. So that's kind of where I'm at. But give me 3 names, Dan, on the outside that you think the Seahawks are going to bring in potentially this offseason.
I think they're looking at value free agents. I do. I don't think they're going to make any big swings. I mean, some people think, well, what about Owe from the Chargers? He was traded from the Ravens. He played for McDonald. He's going to get $20 million plus a year. I don't know if that makes sense in our structure right now. I think they're going to look for value, kind of like when they got Nwosu from the Chargers 4 years ago. It was like a 2-year, $18 million deal, something like that. He was like a rotational player with the Chargers, but they saw enough in him. They thought, as a full-time player, this guy's really something, and they were right. And he parlayed that into a much bigger deal. So I look at a guy like, they got to add to this edge group, right? Arnold Ebiketie is a guy out of Penn State that was drafted literally one spot ahead of Boye Mafe in 2023. And what was interesting about that, or was that 22? Yeah. No?
I think it was 22.
3, 4, 5. 22. The Falcons actually traded up and took Ebiketie one spot in front of Mafe. The Seahawks had Ebiketie higher on their board. John Boyle wrote about this after the draft. They were going to take Ebiketie there. They had to pivot to Mafe afterwards. He never really got it going, although this last year under Raheem Morris, he had like 7 sacks, and he looked more like the player that you'd expect to see. Slightly undersized, but he's got some burst and bend. I think as a rotational guy, he could slide right in, and he'd come really cheap, and maybe there's something more, and you could sign him later on after that, right? I think guys like that. If you lose Kobe Bryant, Why not a reunion with Geno Stone, who played so well in Baltimore for McDonald in that great year they had? He had 7 picks, I think, that year, parlayed that into a 2-year deal with the Bengals. He was fine. He's kind of a league average safety. Like the 7 interceptions were an outlier, but you could bring a guy like that in here. Outside of that, I got to wait and see what they do first before March. I really think the priority is to bring their own guys back. And then if they get the guys back that they want to, I don't think they're going to be very aggressive in free agency for a couple of reasons. They don't want to blow up the salary cap with an outside dude that costs a bunch of money because they have other things left ahead, right? We haven't even talked about Spoon and JSN yet, and what they're going to cost, and Derek Hall even. But also that we might be really set up well for some comp picks this year. And normally I don't pay attention to those. I'd rather just sign good players. And if you sign enough good players that it cancels out your comp picks, but they turn out to be guys like Cooper Kupp and DeMarcus Lawrence, I'm cool with that, right? And remember, a lot of people lose sight of this. The comp picks, you don't get them this year. You get them in next year's draft. But that's kind of why I think they might be leaning that way. Because as you mentioned, Maffei's going to get $15 million plus a year. I think Woolen's going to get 20 or more. Those are probably 3rd round comp picks in a 2027 draft that all the experts have been saying for 2 years now might be one of the best drafts we've ever seen. Not just in blue chip talent at the top, but then just depth throughout the rest of the draft as well. And so it's a good year to have a couple extra mid-round picks. And I think that might be in the cards. I don't think they're going to be that aggressive in free agency.
I kind of tend to lean with you too, Dan, on the aggressiveness in free agency and whether it's there or not. I don't know if it'll be there either. One guy for me that I think to the cornerback room, because I think they'll probably re-sign Joe, but I think, like we said, Woolen will walk. I think one guy that wants to be in Seattle, was in Seattle, I know Brandon Kane thinks the same way I do, is Marlon Humphrey.
Right.
I think he's a guy that you could get on a cheaper veteran deal about, hey, I want to win. I want to go play for a championship level team, get him on a 2-year deal where it's, $15 million for 2 years. I'd take that for a Marlon Humphrey level corner instead of paying the, whatever it's going to be 20 plus for a Reek Woolen. And I know I love Reek and I love what he's done, but you look at what Marlon Humphrey's done in Mike McDonald's scheme consistently. I like the Geno Stone, piece that you threw out there too. The other one that's interesting, the only way I see Seattle really blowing up in free agency is if Tyler Linderbaum ends up on the market and he wants to come.
Which it sounds like he's going to. Yeah, the Ravens they're not going to franchise him, so he's going to hit the market. I'm conflicted on him. He's obviously a really, really great player, although I'm hearing some things the last couple of days about potential medical red flags.
Yeah.
But maybe that keeps his costs down, right? He's not a perfect player. He's better as a run blocker than a pass protector. But it's, I'm just such a big fan of what Jalen Sundell has done. I really do. I really am. And I've run all the numbers, and the Seahawks can do, I'm going to do a show on this in the next couple of days. The Seahawks can do all this stuff we're talking about. They can bring all those internal guys back that we mentioned. They can extend JSN this year, maybe even Spoon, or they can certainly, if they get all this stuff done this year, they'll be able to extend Spoon next year. You can extend Derek Hall or maybe put that off for a year. You can do it all, and then you only have to supplement the roster. You don't need to make any big swings. But if you go pay $20 million a year for a center, which is what he's going to cost, he's going to reset the market for centers. He'll be the highest paid center ever when he signs his deal. Now you got to make some choices. Now you can't do all that stuff. And if that costs you Walker and Shaheed and Kobe Bryant, I don't know, man, because that's how bullish I am. And I've been bullish on Sundell since you and I saw him for the first time at the mock game 2 years ago. But I'm even more bullish about his upside. I think he can be a Pro Bowl center. And I don't want to mess with that. Not for $20 million when Sundell's going to cost you $1.5 million or whatever. We can upgrade right guard. We can have that conversation. But, this idea, and it's pretty popular out there, that you sign Linderbaum for whatever it takes, and then you move Sundell to right guard. I don't think Sundell is as good at right guard as he is at center, because you need a guy at right guard that can move people, and that's not his strength, but you can get away with that at center. So right now I'm out on Linderbaum, but I would put that one firmly in the category that if on the morning of March 9th, the news breaks that the Seattle Seahawks have reached an agreement with Tyler Linderbaum, I'll be ecstatic. and then we'll just figure out the rest of it from there.
Yeah, and I'm kind of leaning in the same camp as you, Dan, where like he to me is the only one I could see them potentially really swinging for the fences for. What I do find interesting is not a free agent, but as someone that we talked about the trade deadline, and Albert Breer brought it back up again, and Albert Breer is very much in the know, is that Seattle is constantly checking in on the Max Crosby situation.
I'm out on Max. It just doesn't make sense for where this team is right now. It made sense at the deadline potentially, but even then, if we want to do some revisionist history and go back and look at that, if we give up Rick Woolen and Boye Mafe at the deadline, and we now know that Crosby's knee was bugging him all year, do we win the Super Bowl? I don't know. I don't know if we do. And now we don't have players to offer. We don't really have anything that makes sense. Maybe you can deal from some depth on the offensive line, but I don't know if that really moves the needle for them. And plus now we only have 4 picks this year. Like, I just don't think it really fits. I think ultimately they fix it and he's going to stay there. There's a lot of positive vibes going on with the Raiders right now. And maybe once he gets into OTAs and everything and the knee gets better, he kind of, gets the juices back again, sees what's happening down there. Cause I think Kubiak's a good hire and I think he's putting a good staff together down there. So I'm just kind of out on that idea now. I think there's some other avenues you can get into to try and supplement that edge group. And it's a really good edge draft too. So we can talk about that if we want to.
Yeah, no, the edge draft definitely is going to be an interesting one. And that's something I definitely have a couple shows down the line here when we get into the draft talk, which will be next week. I'll get into that. It's the Senior Bowl stuff that we saw and so on. But yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting.
Still.
Yeah, I know. So am I. It'll be an interesting offseason for Seattle. I'm interested when we get to finally hear from Fleury. I would assume at some point this week they may have a presser for it, or maybe we wait till the combine. Who knows? But let's. With that being said, Dan, let's talk to the 12. So we've got a bunch of you guys. We got over almost 300 of you watching the show, which is absolutely awesome.
I do have a super chat over on my side. I can't connect it today, but Shane, our buddy Shane Turner from Australia, who's still so upset that they're taking the Rams and 49ers down there instead of the Seahawks. That's a real bummer. He says, "Hey guys, thanks for the show. Go off-season Hawks," and a $2.99 donation. So thanks, Shane. Shane, always good to see you. And then he's got some ideas. He likes our Sundell idea. He says he's good and cheap, and that's a great combination if you can find it in the NFL.
It is, and we're the first. I think it was, what was the stat I saw? The Seahawks were the first team in the Super Bowl era of free agency to have an offensive line win the Super Bowl that was all homegrown.
Yeah. Average age kind of 24 at the beginning of the season, and just it really is remarkable when you consider all the conversation last offseason, all of it about how this thing was never going to get fixed. Schneider should be fired. The offensive line was never, and him saying, "Hey, I'm working on it. Wait till you see what I have up my sleeve." And nobody believed him. And I don't know about you, but I'm already hearing it this year. Everybody wants to sign Linderbaum and get rid of Bradford and start over. And here we are again. But yeah, it's crazy to be talking about continuity and talent on the offensive line, especially when you have a Lombardi in the case.
And the best part is we got to keep our line coach that got them there. That's the best part of that entire offseason so far. So we got Johnny in here, goes 2 goats in Hawks media right here. Appreciate that, Johnny. We've also got one here. He goes, "I wonder what these interviews are like." And I think Johnny's referencing to this, the coaching interviews. And what I can tell you from my experience, Johnny, I actually went on a coaching interview actually for a high school program up here to be their offensive coordinator. And one thing I can say is you need to bring your philosophy, your playbook, and you've got to be able to be confident in what you believe in. The worst thing you get in these situations is where you become a bobblehead and you'll just agree with whatever that head coach or that organization wants. They may not want a bobblehead. They're going to want somebody that's going to have their own ideas, their own philosophies, their own confidence in what they do and how they build their system. And so the one thing you have to be and be able to portray, I think, in a lot of these interviews is you have to be able to portray the ability to teach and not just be like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. How are you going to get players to buy in? How are you going to get them to follow the system and believe in the system. That's one of the biggest things and components in that. And and Dan, I just saw you bring something up on the screen here, so we'll pop this up here.
Well, I saw the question in the comments from Scott 23 Dogs. He says, Bryce asked Dan, how much money do you think the Hawks can have with restructuring? I was just working on a lot of this stuff today, working through my off-season plan, and this came out last week. But this is how much money each team in the NFL has available to them through simple restructures. And what a simple restructure is when you just take someone's base salary and convert that to bonus and pay it to them up front. You can do, per league rules, a certain percentage of that. And the Seahawks are as aggressive about that as any team in the league. They actually write their contracts specifically this way so it's available to them in the second and third year. They actually budget for it. It's part of the plan. And so whenever you see the cap number on Over the Cap or Spot Track or whatever you use, and you go look at it and you say, oh, they have $68 million in cap space, that's quite a bit. It's like 7th in the league, I think, right now. They can get some things done, but they can't do everything. Well, they also have these other levers they can pull with these simple restructures. And it does kick some dead money down the road. But again, the cap keeps going up and they budget for this. They budget 4 or 5 years down the line. They don't just go year by year and hope they can figure it out later. They're not the New Orleans Saints. And as you can see here, the Seahawks are about middle of the league, but they can clear another $57.2 million in cap space with simple restructures. And you add that then to the $68 million they already have. Some quick math, like you can get over $125 million in cap space if you want to. Now, they probably won't use all of that, but it's there to be used if they need to. And that's why I keep telling people they can do all of the things that we want them to do. This idea that you have to let some people go is simply wrong.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, just the simple restructures that they can do, and why I think Joey Lane and Sean Schneider are so good at this now in Seattle. And, it's going to be an interesting kind of offseason for them to pull some of those levers potentially. Yeah. We got one from Max here going, play calling for the Hawks should be easy. Step 1, run the ball. Step 2, play action. Step 3, profit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hey, it worked. We got one here from Alpha from the Discord on the Hawks eye over there. Goes, do you think Fleury, being a first-time play caller, will make teams hesitant to give him a head coaching job? Say in 2 years, if we've got a top 5 offense, could he end up sticking around longer?
When he was hired, I kind of thought this for a moment. He's not one of those young wonder kids, right? He's 48. He's been around a long time. He doesn't have the gelled hair, right? He doesn't look like McVay or Udinsky or McCowan or one of those guys. But here's the bottom line. If the Seahawks go out and win another Super Bowl or even win 13 games again, get back to the Super Bowl, have another successful year, and that offense is top 10 again, he's going to get head coaching interviews. Yep. That's just how it works. If the offense is successful, he's going to get attention. That's just what happens when you're a contender year after year.
And I think this is where the Daniel Stern hire is very, very forward thinking from Mike, because I think that's the hedge is, hey, if we can keep Fleury here for maybe 2, maybe 3 seasons, we can get Stern built up enough that potentially he's the heir apparent in-house that we just, hey, we lose Fleury, we promote from that. That's where I think, that could go. But thank you, Alpha, for the comment there. Johnny back in here. Let's be real. Early in the year, Clinton was not looking good. I think Mac nudged him to the right place.
Yeah, we had our complaints.
Yep.
He wasn't perfect. That's what even in the Super Bowl, I was texting you like, where's, the Patriots were 30th in the league defending the middle of the field. Why are we throwing everything on the outs? Yeah. And so Kubiak was great. And thank you for the Super Bowl. And I think he's going to do good things as a head coach. He wasn't perfect.
He was not. And we've got one here from Prime coming in, going, Raiders hire Zach Azani to be the receiver coach. Just now confirms Frischman Jackson is coming back as receiver coach. Another piece of continuity here.
That's great. And I had heard that Jackson and Kubiak got really close in their 1 year together here, and that he might very well go down there. I know he interviewed him for offensive coordinator before hiring Janoko. It really is looking more and more with each passing day now. I think that was the one I was kind of waiting on. I don't think there's any more defections. I think the Seahawks coaching staff is set.
Well, and I think what's interesting here now with Rick Dennison going, and this is something I didn't realize, the wording that they had used on the staff this year was Justin Outen was listed as run game specialist,
right?
An assistant offensive line coach. Now with Dennison going, who was the run game coordinator, now I think you see Seattle make Justin Outen run game coordinator.
And that might button up the last, because I was told today by someone who's connected with the Raider organization that, hey, I think they're still trying to get out and they may have found a way to do it. The only thing I could possibly think of was that little specification. If they just change his title in Seattle, they can't get him, because the idea that Kubiak would hire him as his offensive line coach doesn't make sense to me. He's just not qualified. He was an assistant offensive line coach this last year. It's the only time he's ever had that on his resume. Kubiak's got to aim higher than that. There's some other guys out there that have a lot more experience doing it in this scheme. And if that's the kind of move you're going to make just to get a guy that you like into your system, I think that's kind of short-sighted.
I agree. And I think this is where Justin Outen ends up getting his run game coordinator designation, gets a slight bump in pay. You know, I think, to be honest, everything I've been hearing is that I don't even think, say Seattle does well again this next year, Dan, and we win another Super Bowl, we get back to the NFC Championship game or whatever it is, and say Kubiak has an okay year but ends up moving on from some of the coaches because he was so late in this process, he wants to build a certain staff. I've been hearing there's no guarantee that any of these Seahawks coaches leave. They like it here with Mike. John Benton loves it here in Seattle. You know, and some of these guys love this team, this organization, the way it works, from John Schneider and everything down. It's gonna be very interesting to see, because I think Kubiak might have to go other places to find people to fill his roster than trying to come back and poach from Seattle. I think he got his two guys from Seattle that were the closest to him in Janoko and Rick Dennison.
A couple of things from my side. Shane's got a couple of questions. First of all, I chuckled at this. He said, "Wonder Kid, you crack me up, Dan. Too much Ted Lasso." Yeah, he's an influence on my life. And then he asked, "Does last year's cap roll over?" And the answer to that is yes. And that's already reflected in what you're seeing on Over the Cap or Spot Track. Is that amount? I think they had like $12-ish million at the end of the year that they could roll over.
All right, we've got Dune Moose in here. Keep hearing rumors that Linderbaum from the Ravens wants to join Mike McDonald and would take a pay cut, move Sundell to right guard. Kind of exciting if there's any truth to that. I haven't heard any rumors that he'd take a pay cut. I have heard rumors that he does, you know, if he hits the market, you know, Mike McDonald and him do have a very good relationship. But, you know, again, he's the only one I could see them swinging for the fences for. Yeah. But I also think there's a price to that, where if it gets out of their price range, very much like Will Fries, right? Like, and if there's medical concerns, hey, we know that Seattle will do their due diligence and be like, hey, we're not going to sign you to anything until we check you out with our med staff. And John Benton's got to sign off on it too. John Benton may sit there and be like, yeah, I get your appeal to Tyler Linderbaum, but he doesn't fit this. Brian Flurry may go, he doesn't fit this scheme the way that we want it to be run. Right?
Or they might just say, we think Sundell can be, if not as good, you know, all we need at center to make this thing really, really roll. Right. There is appeal. I get it. He's still only 25 years old. That's a pretty crazy thing about Linderbaum. And he's a guy that's been on my radar since 4 years ago when our friend Chris Clough was on my show stumping for the Seahawks to take him because he was the best center in the draft that year. But yeah, again, I don't think it makes a lot of sense if you want to fit everything else in. But if they can get Tyler Linderbaum, I ain't going to be mad.
No, neither will I. What do we got here? We got Islam in here with sign Marlowe and draft a corner to learn from him and Spoon. Yep, I'm on board with that plan.
You're drafting a corner fairly high in this draft, no matter what they add from the outside. I think that's really important. They like Pritchett, but there's not a lot. I saw another question somewhere that are there any corners on the ready squad? And there really weren't. It was Shaq Griffin and Shamar Jean-Charles, two veterans whose contracts expired today. Actually, they were not given futures contracts, and so there are no practice squad or futures corners right now in the organization. But luckily for them and us, it is a very, very solid cornerback class. So you're dipping into that no matter what. Even if you bring Reek back, I think you're still drafting a corner in this class.
I totally agree. And there's a question right there from Johnny. I think Pritchett will have more of an opportunity to potentially start this year because I do know they do love him in that building. I think he may get an opportunity, but I do think, to your point, Dan, they are drafting a corner relatively high this year just because they need to. Like, the cupboard is getting more and more bare as you go. Like, if you look at it, Reek walks for say on your roster, you only have Spoon and Pritchett as your corners right now because Job's a free agent, Woolen's a free agent, Shaquille's now out the door. Like, you do need to replenish that position group. And I do not want to go in and do the experiment. I've seen some people say of, hey, let's move Nicky Manwari to boundary corner. No, thank you. I'm good. I don't need to do that experiment.
He really where he is. Yep. He makes that defense really go with where he is. And the Humphrey thing is interesting. I think if you did bring him in, he's a rotational guy at this point in his career. Anyway, I haven't watched any tape. I'd have to look at, why 2025 wasn't as good for him. He was an all-pro in just 2024, so it wasn't that long ago. I've also heard that maybe he's not a perfect fit in the locker room for this group, but nobody would know that more than Mike McDonald. So that's one of those that, hey, if we were to sign Marlon Humphrey, and he's probably going to be released by the Ravens, which would mean that if he's released tomorrow, he's available immediately. He doesn't have to wait till March 9th the way that all the other free agents do. And so, if we find out the next day that he's a Seahawk, I'm going to trust Mike McDonald on that evaluation.
Agree. We got a couple super chats here. And again, super chats get priorities, everyone. So we got this one from Peter Go Hawks with a $5 donation. Thank you, Peter. I'm so Hawkins stoked about this OC pick. I think it's actually going to make our team better in some crazy way, especially for the tight end room. Let's fucking go.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what this guy does with Elijah Arroyo. I really can't.
I'm excited to see what he does with Elijah Arroyo, with AJ Barner, even with Saubert, who he knows so well and is
Robbie Utes
with. Robbie Utes is another one, and even Nick Callerup. He's another guy I'd be excited. About. So he's definitely I'm excited about it as well, Peter, and thank you for the donation. We got another one in here from Shane, came over, $2, $3 donation from Shane. Appreciate it. Can you please upload your show to Apple Podcasts? Shane, that is a off-season thing. I've already got that in the works now and figured out where the glitch was in that. So yes, I will have shows uploaded to Apple Podcasts in the next couple of weeks here. So that way it'll be a ongoing upload process for that. So yes, Shane, it has been worked out. Finally figured it out. You'd think, Dan, with the world that we live in with technology, things wouldn't be so difficult, but
I feel like they're getting harder.
They are.
I do. It's I don't know.
But thank you for the donation, Shane. And yes, I will get those uploaded. We got one here from Johnny, $10 donation. Thank you, Johnny. What do you think about Horton being a reliable number 2 this year? Loved his playmaking. Did his injury compound into something else? Seemed mysterious. So I feel like I was one of the very first people that started talking about this, Dan, when it initially happened, where I went, okay, he took a hit in that game in Washington, and now it's a shin. And then all of a sudden it was just like, it got worse and he went on IR. And I said to Brandon, I was like, I got a feeling he fractured his shin. And then you find out the injury he had coming out of college, going into the draft. One of the things that comes from that injury potentially when the recovery is faster than normal is stress fractures in your shin. I think there's a chance he can be a reliable number 2. But one of my biggest concerns with Horton when he came out was his, skinnier lower frame as a receiver for this exact purpose. And this is where I kind of wonder too, Cooper Kupp's contract just vested for 2026. I don't think Cooper Kupp's retiring. I don't think,
he was talking about OTAs the day after the Super Bowl.
I think Cooper Kupp's coming back. And I think now that he knows what the system requires of him, I think you might even see a better Cooper Kupp in 2026. I really do want to see Horton succeed, though. I really am high on Torrey Horton. He had 6 touchdowns this year, but he's got to stay healthy.
Yeah, and even if Shaheed comes back, I think there's a role for both these guys. They're very, very different receivers. They really are. I'd like to see, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we saw a tiny bit of this late in the season, but I'd like to see like Shaheed lining up in the backfield the way that Clint started doing with JSN a little bit and starting him out there. You're not going to see all three of them on the field at the same time very often, Shaheed, Horton, and JSN, just because they don't run a lot of 11 personnel, but it just, you can never have too many good receivers. Injuries happen. You want to be able to stress defenses in different ways. And maybe Brian Flurry has different ideas. Maybe every once in a while he'll throw 11 personnel out there and go 3 wide receivers just to kind of throw a little curveball at the defense. But I love Horton's game and what he could be. But yeah, those, 6'3", really lean, skinny guys like that, like it makes me nervous just watching them run routes sometimes. And so hopefully 2 years removed from his serious injury in college. And then apparently at Super Bowl week, he was completely fine, said that he was 100% healthy and looking forward to a fully healthy offseason. So another year in the books with him. And then if they could bring Shaheed back, as much as I like this wide receiver class, like you probably don't touch it.
Yeah. Unless you're taking someone late in like round 6 or 7 kind of a thing for, hey, we're looking for a guy to complement our group, because I think Derek Young is back. I got a feeling they'll bring him back because he's a special teams gunner.
Mm-hmm.
I got a feeling Bobo is going to be brought back to camp. I don't know, because is his contract up?
Well, he's undrafted. Those are usually 3-year deals.
Yeah, so he would be up.
He'd be either restricted or exclusive rights.
Yeah.
So it would just be a tender situation. And then I want to see Ricky White get a chance to make this roster this year. Yeah. I really liked what we saw in camp and that whole month I was there last year. I just thought it was a numbers game. I thought he looked like one of the best guys out there every day. But you remember we had MVS and everything at the time too. And White just didn't, he just kind of got buried in the numbers, but he's a guy too that's supposed to be an absolute demon on special teams.
There's one other guy I'd like to see this. Well, I'm going to be excited to see when we're down there for training camp is Tyron Broden.
Yeah.
The guy that we had, like the big, tall receiver that Milrow and him were just lighting up camp.
Yeah.
Like he's another interesting guy. Like they've got some interesting developmental guys to see where they jump this offseason between now, OTAs and so on, to see where they go. We've got a couple more here. We've got Eric in here going with a $10 donation. Thank you, Eric. Goes, great content, gents. Thanks for all you do. Appreciate you, Eric, and everyone else that supports both of our channels and the Seahawks Syndicate and our brothers over there and Brandon and Mookie. We got one more here. WD Ford with a $5 donation. Need you guys nightly. Sorry, that came out weird.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. And that's how you know it's getting
in trouble for that.
Yeah, no kidding. But thank you for the donation. Thank you for the donations to everybody. Johnny comes back with Ricky White. Yes,
the third.
The third. The receiver we took out of
7th rounder UNLV. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Keep up.
Oh, got another donation.
Oh, I like this one. I was just saying this to somebody today because somebody commented on my video from earlier today that if we lose Shaheed, that the 4th and 5th round picks were a waste. Do we win the Super Bowl if we don't make that trade, Bryce?
Oh no, we don't win the Super Bowl.
I don't think we do. We don't win the
Rams game.
We might not even win the Super Bowl.
We don't win the Rams game. In some respects, we may still win that 49ers game, but I don't think it's nearly as convincing. And I don't think
the Falcons game, he had some big plays down the stretch.
Falcons game, yeah. And the thing I think that Shaheed's effect went beyond just taking the ball back. It went on, you look at how the Patriots kicked off to us in the Super Bowl. They weren't letting him get opportunities too often to return. You look at some of the, aspects in the Rams NFC Championship game. They didn't want to give him, opportunities to return because they were, having problems covering him. So, thank you, Daniel, for this. Really appreciate it.
Real quick, I got one from my side. I definitely want to shout out our good friend Jake Ellenbogen, Rams content creator, jumped into my chat. Can't connect it, can't put it on the screen, and just said, congrats on 12,000, Dan. Keep doing your thing, my friend. And hey, Bryce. So good to see our friend Jake.
What's going on, Jake?
One of the good ones.
Absolutely. I love Jake's content and perspective on the Rams. Very level-headed. And it's always good to talk to him and hear him on NFC West Roundtable as well, which
He's
is
level-headed as long as it's not during a game.
That's fair. But Dan, are we really level-headed when it comes to a game?
One of the best decisions I ever made the second half of the season is for the most part, I stopped tweeting during games. I just stayed off my phone, and it made watching games so much more enjoyable. It made my life so much better, just staying away from the trolls and just the cesspool of negativity that Twitter can be at times.
Yeah, that definitely, I don't tweet much during games. I'll retweet things on Twitter that I see, whether it's injuries from like Corbin or Greg or any of the, Seahawk reporters and stuff when it comes to actual news that affects the game. One thing I'm going to be doing this year on the Hawk side is I will be doing watch parties and live streaming games this year, because I found that actually soothing for myself was to do that during the game, because it made me less insanely emotional at points. So
I think I might do the road games next year. Maybe we can do some of those together. But we're planning on if we're not back in Seattle for the season, we're planning on trying to go to most of the home games next year. So
well, there you go. You get to use your season tickets again and everything. Which
the 1 year that I leave the area and turn my tickets over to a buddy, and I miss all of it. I missed all of it except for the mock game and training camp. So yeah.
All right, Dan. Well, I think we're going to call it a wrap on tonight. So what do you have going on over at Seahawks Forever and, your Northwest Patreon that you've got going on over there? Let the viewers know.
And Jake checks back in again, says congrats on a well-deserved Super Bowl. To which I say, thank you, Jake. And that rivalry is not going anywhere. In fact, I think it's going to be even more heated this season. It's going to be crazy. So tomorrow, NFC West mixtape with Rob Guerrera. And then just to let the people know, we are going to continue the Seahawks Syndicate all during the offseason. We're going to cut back to every other week, and nothing this week. So we'll fire back up again next week. We'll do like a combine preview, and then we'll just roll into free agency and the draft after that. And I think we're still planning on the Syndicate during the draft. All throughout the draft, we're going to do a live watch party together. So that is going to be a really, really cool way to digest the draft. And then, just check out Seahawks Forever on YouTube. On Patreon, it's Northwest Forever, because I've got Mariners content on there as well. You can go to that directly by typing in nwforever.com. And then check out the new merch store. I've got some cool stuff. Just created a design, copyright free, for the dark side that I think turned out really cool. Everything's on sale right now. You can get t-shirts for $16. Good way to support me during the off season when views are a little harder to come by at times. And that's Seahawksforever.dashery.com. So all that stuff.
Well, there you go. And all those links will be down in the description. So make sure you guys go check out Dan's merch store and stay on top of your notifications from both of our channels and for the Seahawks Syndicate, because that is something we are going to be doing every other week throughout the offseason with Brandon Kane and Mookie Alexander. Over here on the Hawk side, I'm going to start next week with draft prep and projection shows, where me and Michael Thompson are going to be doing draft shows for the foreseeable offseason. I also have later this week on Thursday night at 7 o'clock, Mookie Alexander and me are going to be continuing on with State of the Hawks. That'll be an ongoing offseason show. Seahawks Aftermath with Michael Thompson now rolls into that, because obviously we don't have any more games to deal with. So Seahawks Aftermath is now going to be part of State of the Hawks. So that's going to be one show. Mookie and Mike will both be on at points, or vice versa, one or the other, depending on schedules. And we're going to have a whole bunch more fun. Dan will be back at some points throughout the off season as well. We'll have obviously breaking news and such, but
training camp's going to be here before we know it, dude.
I know it's going to be here so quick, and we're going to be on location for that. And that's one thing I think we're going to do a better job of this year, Dan, is marketing our live shows that we will do during training camp. We will be doing a big live show, I believe, potentially at where we did it last year at Fast Fashion. And we'd love for you guys to come. It'll be a live show for you guys to come interact with us. And so that'll be a fun thing. And we'll make sure those dates get out for all of that. But with that being said, if you haven't already, head on over to Seahawks Forever, like, subscribe, click that notification. Dan just got over 12,000 subscribers, which is absolutely awesome. And if you haven't, come on over here to the Hawks Eye and sub up and do that here. I'm trying to get to 3,000 before we kick off the NFL season in 2026 with the Seahawks. So we don't have any more late donos, which is great. With that being said, everybody have a great night. And as always, stay loud, be proud, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.